At 18, I found myself pregnant just before my A-levels. Calvin Webb swore he'd take responsibility for me for life. From that moment, I dropped out of school, moved into his house, and focused on my pregnancy and raising our child. Relatives envied my good fortune, becoming a wealthy housewife at such a young age. At 22, when we could legally marry, Calvin returned from his studies abroad with a new girlfriend, proposing an amicable separation. I was too young then, my thinking too shallow. Now I must consider the future of the family business. I can't marry someone without even A-levels, he said. As we weren't legally married, I had no grounds to fight back. He generously compensated me with £200,000 for my lost youth, then showed me the door. Yet, had I taken my A-levels and performed as expected, the scholarships alone would have exceeded that amount. I had squandered a promising hand, playing it disastrously. Filled with regret, I fell into depression and took my own life. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself back in year 13. This time, I had only one goal: to excel in my studies. Ding! This novel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. Calvin's heavy body pressed down on me, and my first reaction was to push him away forcefully. Seeing his obviously younger face and the short haircut from our school days, I felt confused. It took me a moment to realize, hadn't I jumped off a building? Was I reliving my past now? My eyes swept over the coat carelessly thrown on the floor and the birthday cake nearby. I became certain of one thing. This day was my 18th birthday. It was also the day I made the biggest mistake of my life. My boyfriend Calvin Webb couldn't control his passion for me, and I didn't refuse him. Then I would accidentally get pregnant, be persuaded to drop out of school, and marry Calvin. Calvin Webb, whom I had just pushed aside, approached me with a bewildered look on his face. "What's wrong, love? Are you scared?" "I'll be gentle, I promise." I didn't want to say another word to him. I got up, putting my clothes back on. "Calvin, it's over between us." "What did you say?" Calvin looked utterly shocked. I didn't want to repeat myself. Having dressed, I headed for the door. Calvin, not even bothering to put on a shirt, quickly moved to block my path, his upper body still bare. Why? From his perspective, our relationship had always been smooth sailing. We were stable, never even having had an argument. So he truly couldn't fathom why I would suddenly want to break up. There's no particular reason. We're still students, we shouldn't be dating in the first place. I brushed his hand away and left without looking back. The temperature at the end of February was still quite low. Yet I willingly stood in the cold wind for a long time, allowing the chill to invade my body. This coldness made me feel incredibly grounded. It made me acutely aware that everything before me was real, not just a false dream. God had shown mercy. I had truly been reborn. The phone in my pocket kept vibrating. Apart from Calvin Webb's inquiring messages, there were also notifications from the class group chat. Today was Sunday. Our form tutor reminded us not to forget to return to school on time. I didn't reply to Calvin's messages, I only responded in the group chat when I received the reminder. Following the route in my memory, I hurried back to school. Standing at the school gates, tears fell uncontrollably. Returning to school. I could study again. I'm currently attending St. Paul's School, a prestigious private institution. The annual tuition is nearly £200,000, making it a school for the elite. I never thought I'd have any connection to such a place. Because my family isn't well off. I lost my father when I was young, and my mother has been working hard to raise me on her own. She struggles just to cover our basic needs, let alone afford such exorbitant school fees. During my first 2 years of A-levels, I was at a state school, excelling academically. At the end of my second year, the headmaster of St. Paul's, eager to boost their Oxford and Cambridge admission rates, began recruiting top students from other schools. I was among those approached. The offer was enticing. All fees are waived. A £100,000 scholarship upon enrollment. An additional £300,000 bonus if I got into Oxford or Cambridge University. When this opportunity landed in front of me, I was instantly captivated. Regardless of whether I made it to Oxford or Cambridge University, I'd receive £100,000 just for attending. £100,000. That's a lot of money. Why not study there if I had the chance? Moreover, St. Paul's was rumored to have an excellent learning environment. It seemed like a dream come true. How could I possibly refuse? Logically, with such attractive terms, St. Paul's should have been able to recruit quite a few promising students. But when I actually transferred there in my previous life, I discovered I was the only one they brought in. Later, I learned why. The school's teaching staff and student quality weren't actually that great. St. Paul's collected hefty fees each year. Most of their budget went into maintaining an elite facade. A beautiful campus, a 5-star hotel quality canteen, luxurious dormitories, and a wide array of extracurricular activities. They invested very little in what matters most for a school, teachers, and education. It was all style over substance. As a result, families who truly cared about their children's education, even if they could afford it, wouldn't send their kids here. So most of the students were genuinely spoiled rich kids. They hadn't scored well enough in their GCSEs to get into top schools, couldn't make it into the truly elite private schools. And their families, unwilling to let them waste time in mediocre schools, sent them to Paul's school. A school that appeared impressive and powerful on the surface. In my previous life, when I learned the truth, I wasn't too worried. I had strong confidence in myself. I believed I could excel through self-study even in such an environment. But I never anticipated that I would end up losing my way there. The evening study session had begun. The classroom wasn't particularly rowdy, but it wasn't quiet either. The teachers didn't do much to stop the chatter. Paul's school's educational philosophy claimed to provide a well-rounded education, never constraining students with rigid rules. In reality, they were simply disguising neglect as encouragement of independence. If one listened carefully to the surrounding conversations, they'd find that very few were discussing their studies. The boys were talking about cars, watches, and trainers. The girls were chatting about handbags, jewelry, and makeup. Their discussions were peppered with the names of expensive luxury brands. Things that were out of reach for ordinary people. No one seemed too concerned about the A-levels. This exam wouldn't significantly impact their futures. At least, that's what they believed. Once, I too had lost my way in this atmosphere. I forgot where I came from and thought that studying wasn't the only path forward. Now, I tune out the noise and bury my nose in my book. I'm not really Rachel Sparrow, the year 13 student. I'm Rachel from 4 years in the future. During those 4 years, I spent 1 year pregnant and 3 years raising a child. What I didn't do was study. Even a university student returning to 6th form would struggle. How much more so for me, who had long since stopped learning? Despite my excellent grades in secondary school, I now had to refamiliarize myself with everything. I was still nursing a headache when Calvin Webb approached my desk, clutching an exam paper and dragging a chair over. He put on a show of wanting to ask about a question, but his true intentions were clear. "Rachel, I need an explanation," he said in a low voice, clearly trying to contain his anger. I didn't look at him. My eyes were glued to my textbook. This second chance at life was too precious. And time was too short for me to waste any energy on hating or seeking revenge against Calvin. With only 3 months left until the A-levels, this was my only opportunity to change my fate. Nothing else mattered in comparison. I didn't want to engage with Calvin. But it was obvious that ignoring him would only make him persist, wasting more of my time. I've already explained. We're students, we shouldn't be dating. Now I need to study, so please leave, I said coldly. Rachel, do you hear how ridiculous you sound? He laughed bitterly. If you're so keen on following school rules, why did you agree to be with me in the first place? Agreeing before doesn't conflict with wanting to end things now. Baby, Calvin suddenly softened his tone. Is this about what happened today? If you're not ready, I can wait until after the A-levels. He nuzzled his head against mine. Don't talk about breaking up, okay? You know how much I love you. I couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. Calvin certainly acted as if he loved me. When I first transferred to Paul's school, I felt incredibly insecure. The gap in our family backgrounds was so vast that I believed I didn't fit in with the other students at all. I didn't even dare to speak more than necessary, just burying myself in my studies every day. Calvin was the first person to approach me. He didn't mock my unfashionable clothes or cheap accessories. Instead, he patiently helped me integrate into the group step by step. When others made fun of me, he would even stand up for me. Under these circumstances, it was natural that Calvin and I grew closer. In those tender years of youthful excitement, his sincere treatment of me inevitably led to my developing feelings for him. Later, Calvin confessed his love to me. Years of ingrained student discipline made me instinctively reject him, citing many reasons: that dating at our age was wrong, that our family backgrounds were incompatible and wouldn't lead to a good outcome, and so on. He told me not to worry about these trivial matters. He said that unless I could look him in the eye and say I had absolutely no feelings for him, he wouldn't give up. I couldn't lie at all. In a daze, I agreed to be his girlfriend. After we started dating, he treated me even better. He spent money on me without hesitation, buying me gifts. At first, I was very nervous, feeling unable to reciprocate equally, and refused to accept them. But Calvin asked if I didn't see him as someone I truly wanted to love and rely on. He said these expenses were just a drop in the ocean for him and told me not to worry about it. When we had our first intimate encounter and I unexpectedly became pregnant, Calvin showed a maturity beyond his years. At that time, I was in a complete panic. But he hugged me and said that even though we weren't of legal marriage age, he would definitely take responsibility for me and our child. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Webb, also appeared very kind and caring towards me. To punish Calvin for his recklessness and to apologize to me, they gave him quite a thrashing and made him kneel at home for 3 days. Calvin endured it all. In the end, he embraced me, covered in bruises, looking pitiful, and said he had already discussed it with his parents. When we reached the legal age to marry, he would give me a grand wedding, making me his lawful wife. After that, no one would ever laugh at me again. In my previous life, even when Calvin brought his new girlfriend home, I only thought he had a change of heart. I never doubted the sincerity of his 18-year-old self. It wasn't until I ended my life by jumping off a building, and my soul lingered around the Webb house due to resentment, that I heard the truth. It turned out Calvin's initial approach to me was ill-intentioned. Our intimate encounter wasn't because of youthful passion and lack of self-control, and my pregnancy wasn't an accident. Everything was premeditated. The entire Webb family was involved in this conspiracy. Calvin Webb had a highly respected great-grandfather. He was over 100 years old, quite long-lived. His greatest wish was to enjoy the happiness of having 5 generations living under one roof before he passed away. The old man's health had been deteriorating in recent years, and no one knew when he might leave this world. His obsession with this wish grew stronger. The Webb family had only one child in each generation, so having 5 generations together meant Calvin had to marry and have a child early. Ironically, despite the Webb family's wealth, they lacked the decorum typically associated with affluent families in television dramas. Their views were extremely old-fashioned. So old-fashioned that they saw nothing strange about a student still in high school getting married and having a child. According to them, people of the older generation all married and had children at a young age. In ancient times, people even started families at 14 or 15. Getting married wouldn't interfere with continuing education, they said. To fulfill Calvin's great-grandfather's wish, the entire Webb family had been searching for a suitable marriage partner for Calvin. But what normal family would allow their daughter to marry and have children so young? It was below the legal marriage age, they couldn't get a marriage certificate. And it was a huge risk to be married without legal recognition. There were some poor families who valued sons over daughters and were willing to sell their daughters. But the girls from those families hadn't received much education. And the Webbs thought they weren't smart enough and would pass on inferior genes to future children. At this time, I happened to transfer to Paul's school, catching the eye of the Webb family. In their eyes, I came from a modest background, without much social influence. I had lost my father at a young age, lacking love. My mother was dull and indecisive, and I was shy and introverted, easy to manipulate. I was an Oxford and Cambridge University prospect, intelligent, I was tall with long legs, with a proper and pretty appearance. Good looks genes, also matching Calvin's aesthetic preferences. I was practically the perfect candidate they were looking for. The Webb family knew that if they approached me directly about this matter, I would never agree. Although my family background wasn't good, I still had some ambition at the time. So they simply had Calvin put on a facade of youthful infatuation, concealing the true purpose of approaching me. He used gentle and caring attention to open my heart, used frank confessions to stir my heartstrings, used sweet words and gestures to wear down my resolve. At my age and with my limited life experience, it was almost impossible to resist such an approach. While I was marveling at having found a fairy tale love, he was calculating how to lure me into bed, planning to poke holes in condoms to ensure I would get pregnant, and how to casually reveal the pregnancy once it happened, so that I would be too ashamed to return to school, increasing the chances of their plan succeeding. They specifically schemed to complete all this before the A-levels. Because if I took the A-levels normally, got into a good university, and had a clear direction for my future, I wouldn't be so easily fooled. The probability of convincing me to give up my studies and have the baby would significantly decrease. Even the story of him kneeling before his parents for 3 days and being beaten by both of them was just an elaborate ruse. He used his unwavering determination to exchange for my commitment not to give up. At that time, I was indeed moved to tears and decided I would do whatever it took to keep our love child. But everything, from the very beginning, was nothing more than a deliberate and planned deception. As these thoughts flooded my mind, anger suddenly filled my chest. I couldn't hold back. I raised my hand and gave Calvin Webb a resounding slap across the face. The classroom, which had been buzzing with chatter, suddenly fell silent. Everyone, including the teacher, turned to look at me. Before the teacher could ask, I stood up and spoke first. "Sir, Calvin Webb has been harassing me." I paused for a moment, then continued, "He said he loves me." With A-levels just around the corner, talking about love and relationships is clearly an attempt to distract me. Paul's school's policies were indeed more relaxed compared to many other schools. However, given the cultural norms, teenage relationships were still frowned upon. At least officially, they were prohibited. Moreover, I was a student the school had invested into AIM for Oxford and Cambridge University. The teachers naturally paid more attention to my welfare. As expected, the teacher's face darkened. "Calvin, come with me to the office." Calvin looked at me with disbelief, gritting his teeth as he followed the teacher's order and left the classroom. As soon as the teacher left, the classroom erupted into hushed whispers and gossip. Everyone was speculating about what had happened between Calvin and me. After all, while relationships might be hidden from teachers, they were never a secret from classmates. Everyone already knew about Calvin and me dating. I paid no attention to these discussions. I simply immersed myself back into reviewing my study notes. Time was really pressing. When I returned to the dormitory that evening, a roommate came over to inquire about the evening study session. I didn't beat around the bush. "Calvin and I have broken up. Please don't mention him in front of me anymore." Everyone chuckled and joked for a while before dropping the subject and heading off to bed. Meanwhile, I continued to burn the midnight oil. There was so much I had forgotten. I needed to squeeze out every bit of time and energy to get back to my peak performance. It was at this moment that I suddenly appreciated the benefits of this elite school. The student dormitory was a suite shared by 4 people, with a bathroom and a living room. Each person had their own private bedroom within the suite. No matter how late I studied, I didn't have to worry about disturbing others. So, in my previous life, how did I manage to ignore such an excellent study environment step by step? Giving my heart and soul to dating instead? Based on the rough review during the evening study session, I drew up a revision-focused chart for myself. I hadn't regressed too much in history and English. I just needed to review the key points again. Maths and science would be more challenging. Many formulas had become blurry, and my thinking wasn't as sharp when solving problems. I needed more intensive practice. After setting a progressive plan, I finally turned off the light and went to sleep. After Calvin had thoroughly embarrassed himself, he realized he could no longer deceive me. He gave up trying to string me along. Instead, he began to work against me. He slandered me and spread rumors about me. "Do you know why Rachel Sparrow suddenly hates me?" he would say. "It's because I discovered her secret. She's loose, you know. There's no feeling when you're with her. Who knows how many times she's done it before. I really thought she was some pure, good student before. Well, being poor isn't scary, but willingly debasing yourself is truly hopeless." He told others that I had seduced him first, which was why he dated me. The gifts he had given me of his own accord suddenly became things I had demanded. He claimed that I was desperate to get into his bed. But when he discovered my true intentions, I became furious and hit him out of shame. In short, I was painted as a cheap girl trying to climb the social ladder through unscrupulous means. When two people from vastly different backgrounds date, it's always easier to cast suspicion on the one from the less privileged background. Moreover, Calvin had much better social connections at Paul's school than I did. People were naturally more inclined to believe his words. Even those who had doubts instinctively sided with Calvin. This kind of salacious gossip always spreads the fastest. In less than a day, I had become known to everyone as a scheming slut. I, who already didn't fit in well at school, was completely ostracized. In response to this, I chose to ignore it. Proving my innocence would take a great deal of time, and time was what I lacked most. Besides, no one really cared about the truth. Even if I argued myself hoarse trying to explain, it would only give others more to gossip about. Being isolated wasn't so bad. At least no one would disturb me while I focused on revising for my A-levels. As for my reputation in the eyes of these people, it didn't matter. It wasn't important. We weren't from the same world anyway. When there's such a disparity in overall circumstances, even if I left a good impression on them, it wouldn't make a difference. I would never be their equal friend. If someday I became someone they wanted to associate with, they would rush to clear up these rumors for me. For me, there was only one reliable path to becoming stronger: studying hard. My indifferent reaction didn't escape Calvin Webb's notice. Mistaking it for fear, he became even more brazen, spouting nonsense to others right in front of me. He seemed convinced that I wouldn't dare say anything. For a moment, I did consider slapping him again and then calling the police. I could do that, but to be honest, I was worried about whether he would retaliate more viciously afterwards. Given Calvin's petty nature, he certainly would. Like most people in this school, he had already decided to apply for university foundation courses abroad through Paul's school, bypassing the A-levels. He had plenty of time and energy to cause trouble for me. The reality was, even though I was supposedly a reincarnated person with some advantages, at this moment, I still had no means to exact thorough and effective revenge on him. Neither for his actions in his previous life nor for his current behavior. I lacked both the ability and the energy to strike back. But it didn't matter. Life is long. I've only been off sick for 2 days, and the class has turned into a complete cesspit. I thought, trying to suppress my churning emotions. Suddenly, a loud, high-pitched female voice rang out. It was a distinctive tone, belonging to the infamous spoiled princess of the class, Doreen Lockwood. Doreen turned to Calvin. "Did you eat shit in the loo? Your mouth's spewing rubbish." She seemed utterly unafraid of discussing matters related to sexual harassment. "What's all this about tightness or loose? Have you considered that maybe you're just too small?" Doreen's family background was the most prestigious among these spoiled brats, and she always acted brazenly. Calvin's face turned red with frustration. "It's her problem. I've never had that issue with anyone else. Sounds like you're quite experienced." Doreen gave him a contemptuous look. "You must be quite the depraved one, aren't you, you rotten cucumber?" Calvin didn't dare to provoke her, gritting his teeth in anger. Doreen looked around at the others. "We've known each other for ages in this class. Everyone knows what kind of person each of us is and what we're capable of. We're all adults here, and you can't even take a fair stance?" How pathetic. No one dared to contradict her. "Doreen, why are you standing up for Rachel? Don't you know she hates you? She's told me so many times that you're brainless and love showing off, that you're an idiot," Calvin said through gritted teeth. Slander, blatant slander. Although my relationship with Doreen wasn't great, I had never spoken ill of her behind her back. I was about to speak up and clarify, but then I saw Doreen roll her eyes at Calvin. What we girls say about each other is none of your business. Are you trying to divide us now? You're such a loser. Calvin was dumbfounded. He couldn't understand why Doreen would stand up for me. After all, Doreen had once been the first to mock me. It was my first day at Paul's school, and the teacher assigned me the seat behind Doreen Lockwood. She turned around excitedly to talk to me, picking up my pencil case with a look of admiration. How did you manage to get this one? It's a limited edition. And you're using it as a pencil case, that's such a waste. Then she paused, looking puzzled. Min Min? The surrounding students burst into laughter. I didn't understand what everyone was laughing about, but I felt incredibly awkward. I had bought the pencil case myself from a small accessories shop. It was cream-colored, cute and soft, with just the right capacity, and very durable. I had never paid attention to the letters on it. Did they have some other meaning? Later, Calvin told me that there's a luxury brand called Miu Miu. Their items easily cost over 5 figures. My pencil case was a knockoff. Doreen had deliberately tried to embarrass me. She wanted to mock me for being a vain girl who couldn't afford luxury goods but tried to pass off a fake as genuine. After hearing Calvin's words, I was overwhelmed by an unprecedented sense of inferiority. From that moment on, I instinctively avoided her at all costs. Snapping back to reality, Doreen had just finished telling Calvin off and was walking back to her seat. She passed by me. I whispered a quick thank you to her. As usual, she completely ignored me, letting out a humph as she turned her head away and sat down, pulling out her compact to touch up her makeup. What a peculiarly difficult person. During lunch break, instead of heading straight to the cafeteria, I went to the school's bakery and queued for half an hour to get a freshly baked trifle. I chose the strawberry flavor. Just as I reached the front of the queue, Doreen also arrived at the bakery. I handed her the freshly made strawberry trifle. No need to queue, I've got one for you. During class break, I'd overheard her muttering about wanting a strawberry trifle. Doreen looked startled. What are you doing? Thanking you. To be honest, given how focused I am on revision right now, if it was for myself, I wouldn't have spent the time to buy it. But for Doreen, it was worth it. Doreen pursed her lips. About earlier today? It wasn't necessary. I wasn't speaking up for you, I just can't stand when people slut-shame girls. It's not just about today, I said. I owe you many thanks. Doreen was visibly confused. I can't blame her for being confused. I had to revisit the events of my past life to realize this point. When Calvin and I officially started dating, everyone else cheered and congratulated us. Only Doreen was visibly unimpressed. She rolled her eyes at me in front of everyone, saying, "Have you forgotten your real situation? You've got your priorities all wrong." Because of what happened on the first day of school, I instinctively thought she was mocking me again, ridiculing my poverty and implying I didn't belong in their social circle. But thinking about it now, wasn't she right? I came here to study hard, earn scholarships, and pave a bright path for myself. I truly didn't have the luxury to spend my precious youth on frivolous romantic pursuits. I also remember that after my unexpected pregnancy was revealed in my previous life, Doreen had a private conversation with me. She fiercely insisted that I must have an abortion and then focus on adjusting my mindset for the A-levels. Even if I didn't perform well this year due to the circumstances, she urged me to consider retaking the exams rather than giving up my education to get married and have a child. She didn't know about the Webb family's plans. She was simply considering the consequences of the situation itself. Unfortunately, by then, Calvin had already brainwashed me, and my pride prevented me from seriously considering her words. I only felt that she was deliberately opposing me again. How foolish I was. Now that I think about it, I not only owe her many thank yous, but I also owe her many apologies. I misjudged her character and squandered her good intentions. I'm truly sorry. In short, thank you, I said. And I should also say sorry to you. I've been misunderstanding you since the start of term. Because of my own insecurities, I developed prejudices against you. I apologize for that. I couldn't explain to her about all the things from my past life. So I could only speak about the timeline of this life. Doreen turned her head away, and it was a while before she looked back at me. Her eyes seemed to have reddened a bit. I should apologize to you too. After all, that incident did embarrass you. But I really didn't mean to. On your first day, I wanted to be friends with you. I was trying to find a common topic to talk about, and I didn't expect. Well, it's understandable that a posh girl wouldn't recognize a knockoff. Anyway, I absolutely didn't intend to embarrass you. Later, I wanted to explain things to you, but you had already started to dislike me. I'm not someone who can easily swallow my pride, so... she's a tsundere and kind-hearted young lady, indeed. I never imagined Doreen and I would become friends like this. It was certainly unexpected. Doreen was very curious about why I suddenly came to my senses. And broke up with Calvin so decisively. After all, when I first started dating Calvin, I wouldn't listen to a word of her advice. I thought about it and decided to be honest with her about my time travel experience. If I had worried before that she might think I was crazy for saying it. After getting to know her better, I had no such concerns at all. Sure enough, after hearing my story, Doreen's face was filled with anger as she clenched her fists. The Webb family are truly despicable. We must get revenge on them, and it must be brutal. I shook my head. We're not strong enough yet, and the time isn't right. I can only focus on preparing for my A-levels now. Doreen's eyes lit up as if she had thought of something. Since you've come back from the future, you must have paid attention to the exam questions last time, right? Should I congratulate you in advance on being this year's top A-level student? I could only shake my head again. In my previous life, after deciding to give up on my A-levels, I developed a sort of mental block. I avoided anything related to the exams like the plague. It wasn't just that year, but every year after as well. Every A-levels day, I wouldn't even dare to turn on my phone. I could only pass the time by frantically doing housework. I knew that from the moment I decided to give up on my A-levels, my subconscious had already started to regret it. To prevent this regret from consuming me, my brain activated a self-protection system, blocking out everything related to the exams. Doreen hugged me understandingly. You won't miss out this time. Go for it. I hugged her back. There's one more thing I need to tell you. It was also the second reason why I decided to reveal my time travel experience to Doreen. There was something I had to warn her about. Doreen's family ran a chain of educational support centers across the country, quite well known in their field. She often joked that while her parents had nurtured countless successful students, their own child was a bitter disappointment. Perhaps it was because of this family background that she particularly couldn't stand seeing someone with academic potential waste their talents. As for herself, although she was aware that she was a bit of a slacker, she had never worried about it due to her family's privileged financial situation. She had long been prepared to coast through life. However, within 3 years, there would be a change in education policy, and supplementary education institutions would be completely overhauled. Doreen's easy life would ultimately prove to be nothing more than a bubble. In my previous life, after the overnight reshuffling of educational support institutions, Doreen's family faced a major cash flow crisis. Many large companies naturally have both assets and liabilities, and don't keep too much cash on hand. When the cash flow can't keep up, bankruptcy can happen in an instant. After Doreen's family business ran into trouble, her studies abroad also faced a funding crisis. She had no choice but to do everything she could to find part-time jobs to earn money for her tuition fees. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to get her university degree. Not only would the fees and time spent on the first 2 years be wasted, but her future career options would also be much more limited. Doreen had always been quite flamboyant in high school. So when this happened, Calvin took great pleasure in telling me about it. A kind-hearted girl like her shouldn't end up in such a situation. If possible, try to persuade your parents not to put all their eggs in one basket. See if they can quickly expand into other fields, diversify their business. Doreen panicked. That won't work. My parents are very stubborn. They'll never believe me. What if I can't convince them? Oh no, we won't have a good life anymore. If you can't convince them, then find a way to prepare yourself in advance, I said, holding her hand. But I'm useless. I'm not good at studying, and I don't know how to start a business. I can't make money, she whimpered. You can do it, I said, having already thought of a plan for her. You can become a beauty influencer. Soon, a certain short video app would become incredibly popular. Doreen always paid great attention to her appearance and had excellent makeup skills and aesthetic sense. In my opinion, she was even better than many up-and-coming influencers. If she could enter the field early, she would definitely become a top influencer. Once you succeed, you can prove to your parents that you have foresight and strong survival skills. Then when you make suggestions to them later, they'll definitely be willing to listen carefully. The days that followed became remarkably simple. I threw myself wholeheartedly into revision, solving practice questions endlessly each day. Meanwhile, Doreen had already begun operating her own TikTok account. Before I knew it, May had arrived, and I inexplicably started having frequent nightmares. Every night when I closed my eyes, I dreamed of what happened after I married into the Webb family in my previous life. Back then, after the A-levels, I began showing signs of depression, and my pregnancy was unstable. The Webb family, to ensure I could give birth safely, promised to send me abroad to study after the baby was born. However, after the child was born, they went back on their word. They said the baby was too young to be separated from its mother, and that girls should prioritize supporting their husbands and raising children anyway. They argued that no matter how much education one receives, women ultimately return to the family, so why bother studying at all? In truth, their reasons all boiled down to one thing. They feared that if I resumed my studies, I would regain clarity of mind, rediscover my potential, and become harder to control. After the child was born, my life in the Webb household for those few years was far from easy. Despite having nannies and housekeepers, Mr. and Mrs. Webb wouldn't allow them to take care of me. Instead, they treated me like a servant. I was expected to do the shopping, cooking, cleaning, and even pay respects to them morning and night like in Victorian times. Even though I complied with all of this, Calvin Webb still easily dismissed me when he found a new girlfriend. He gave me £200,000 and claimed he had done his utmost duty. How ridiculous. It's clear that when a person doesn't retain any ability to be independent, they're treated like an ant in someone's palm, with no respect whatsoever. I kept having these nightmares of being trapped in the Webb family, leaving me with dark circles under my eyes and completely drained of energy. When Doreen discovered this, she stubbornly started coming to my bedroom every night, squeezing into the same bed with me. Don't be afraid. I'm here to protect you. Even if Calvin Webb tried to snatch you away, he'd never be able to take you from me. Believe it or not, it was quite effective after she started sharing my bed. I never had those wretched dreams again. I performed quite steadily during those 2 days of A-levels. After the results came out, although I didn't become the top student, I successfully reached the threshold for Oxford and Cambridge University, and got into the finance program I wanted. During my university years, I also worked part-time as a social media influencer. To be honest, I didn't have any special talents or natural gift for video operations. But with my identity as a student from a prestigious university, I shared some daily life and study tips. This helped me stand out among thousands of newcomers, attracting some followers and occasionally receiving advertising income. I combined this income with the scholarship I received for getting into Oxford, and made some small investments using my professional knowledge. The returns were surprisingly good. These gains became the seed money for my startup in my 3rd year of university. In this life, my fate took a completely different turn from my previous one. I started living the life I had always wanted and deserved. Of course, I didn't forget about Calvin Webb. I wouldn't forgive him and his family for the despicable things they did just because my life had improved. The year I graduated from university, Calvin also graduated from abroad. I sent an anonymous email to his university, reporting his academic misconduct. Calvin had always been academically incompetent. In his previous life, he relied on hiring ghostwriters to get by. Of course, he wouldn't have changed much in this life. The only difference was that this time, the ghostwriter he encountered was my alternate account. The evidence was more than sufficient. His degree was revoked, and his overseas scholar girlfriend, whom he wanted to marry in his previous life, discovered his true nature and angrily broke up with him. Come to think of it, this girl had a miserable fate in the previous life too. She was deceived by the Webb family, believing that Calvin's child with me was actually his younger brother, and foolishly married that scumbag. I lowered my eyes. Of course, this level of punishment wasn't enough for Calvin. Even without any degree, it wouldn't prevent him from inheriting the family business. He could still pretend and boast to others, no one would actually check his degree certificate. But this was all I could do for now. The rest would have to wait. I focused on developing my own career and living my life to the fullest. By the time I was 30, my career was quite outstanding. I had an investment company with an excellent reputation in the industry. I never knew I could achieve such great things. Due to the poor economic environment and Calvin's mediocre abilities, the Webb Group's business declined under his management. He was desperate to achieve something noteworthy. Finally, the opportunity one had been waiting for arrived. I had my team set up a trap, exploiting Calvin's desperate desire for success, luring him to blindly expand into unfamiliar territories. Then, we completely drained his capital chain. The Webb Group officially went bankrupt. Their debts exceeded their assets. He and his parents now had to work diligently every day just to make ends meet. It would be difficult for him to even find a wife now. When the news came, I didn't feel much. At best, it added a tiny, insignificant bit of pleasure to my free and comfortable life. My phone buzzed with a message. Doreen invited me on a holiday. She became famous not long after starting her social media career. She seized the opportunity to convince her parents to open an MCN company. And she also established her own cosmetics brand. Because it was entirely in line with her interests, she managed it exceptionally well. At 30, we were both single and wealthy. Going on holiday together. Now that's the real pleasure.